Hello fellow creature, welcome back to Rooftop Talks. In this video, I want to expand on an idea I had in one of my previous videos. I proposed that we should arrange school trips to slaughterhouses, and we should offer this to non-vegan parents, that their children can go on these school trips where they can see the entire process that farm animals go through in their lives. The children a certain age, perhaps at 12 years old, maybe, just as a guess, have a right to know what it is they are eating and what the process was, that what the animal went through to make it to their plates in that way. And this is like a challenge, you know? It's a challenge to non-vegans. Now, if they are to say, no, I'm not gonna allow my child to go on a school trip to a slaughterhouse, then I think you have to admit to yourself and to us that there is a problem with the means by which we obtain animal products. This can be meat, dairy, eggs, fish, leather, fur, things like that. This is, of course, a rhetorical device for me to get you to admit that there are problems, and that if your child were to see that at the age of, let's say, 12, when they're just exiting childhood into teenagehood, into adolescence, that experience of going to a slaughterhouse, a standard slaughterhouse, you know, a legal standard slaughterhouse, would traumatize them. It would leave them with deep psychological rifts, most likely. And I want to expand on that here because in the wake of that video, a few of my subscribers, quite a number of vegans, who I tend to listen to more than non-vegans, they have more credibility in my eyes, they kind of push back on this idea. And if I had to boil it down to one reason, it's that there is a worry among vegans that to show young people the reality of what happens to animals, the torture and killing they go through, the violence inflicted upon the innocent, if they saw that, they would become desensitized to it in their later life. It is true that many people who hunt, like many adults who hunt, were taught to hunt by their fathers or their grandfathers. Many fishermen who are taught to fish and who are taught to drag sea creatures out of the ocean, intelligent, sensitive sea creatures, to drag them out of the ocean and bludgeon them to death with a blunt instrument or over a rock, that they were conditioned into doing that in their childhood, and that's why they have a sort of disconnect to that nowadays. There is some validity to that suspicion. Simply showing someone the process does not necessarily change their attitude towards it, or it does not necessarily just make them vegan. Sometimes it does. Sometimes someone will witness for the first time an animal being killed in the regular way, in the legal standard way. They know it stirs something so deep within them, and they might not have the answers yet, but they go vegan as a result. We see children a lot of the time actually around the age of 12, and sometimes earlier and sometimes a little bit later, they try to go vegan. And often these are like failed attempts. They understand at that age that something's wrong. They have that little bit of teenage rebelliousness sometimes. They think, well, my parents aren't so smart anyway. And they try. And there are many recorded, and many anecdotes will speak to this and will attest to this. There are many failed attempts at going vegan by children. And what happens in many of those cases is that they try, and because of the environment they're in, because of the amount of resistance they face, the amount of ridicule from their siblings a lot of the time, and from their parents, and from their wider family, and from their school friends, and from their community, that piles in, they unfortunately relent at some point. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. I'm going to bring it back to school trips to slaughterhouses. I'm first showing a few reasons why this idea of hesitating to show a young person the reality of slaughter could be valid. I'm of no illusion that it would be as simple as the way I describe it. I'm under no illusion that that turning everyone vegan is simply a matter of showing them the slaughter process when they are young. Okay? Let me just make that clear. I'm not saying it would be that easy. What I am saying is that informing the public about the animal holocaust, and it is a holocaust, informing the public is a prerequisite to changing the paradigm. It's a prerequisite to the vegan argument. First, they must be informed. Then they must be persuaded, but they cannot be persuaded if they are not informed. I'm someone who has conversations with the public about animal use. Every rhetorical tool in my toolbox, every verbal means of persuasion, besides with the exception of lying, to try and persuade people to stop abusing animals and to stop paying for animals to be abused. I don't get out there as often as I'd like. I'm trying to do more of it these days. I have to travel into the city, into the inner city, and that takes time. I'm a working adult, so I'd like to do it more, but these experiences is what I have to go off of. And what I find is more than half of the battle, ideological battle, nothing physical about it, but more than half of the battle is simply informing people of the reality, because they do not know. I'm talking about adults. They do not know, let alone children. Adults and children have no idea what farm animals actually go through. And many times they have an inkling of an idea. They know that it's bad, but they don't have any specific idea in mind. They don't have an accurate depiction of just how ruthlessly, how violently animals are exploited for their meals, for the meals they eat 3 times a day, and the snacks in between, and for the clothing that they wear, and sometimes for the services that they order. In the city where I'm living, they parade horses through the streets. People ride on the backs of horses and they whip them and stuff like that. They might have an idea because that's out in public, but especially with farm animals, they really don't have a clue. And so before I'm able to persuade them, I must first inform them. And now think of it from the point of view of a non-vegan who's just passing by, who happens to see a cube of truth and is shocked by what they see. Now, they have to make 2 steps in that conversation instead of 1. And that is a tall order for anyone, any member of the public, to make 2 steps to first learn something and then on the spot act on that new information that they've learned. That's asking a lot of someone. When they're already going about their day, they might be on their way to work or they might be on their way back from work. You know, they've got their own lives going on. You're asking them to first learn something within the course of a conversation and then to make a decision. I tell you what, it would be so much easier if everyone was informed first. Information is the prerequisite to persuasion, to change, right? And it would make our jobs a lot easier as advocates, animal rights advocates. They first need to know how bad it is. So much of our time is spent just informing people. And it would be easier if every person that we came across in the street had already been on a school trip where they were just informed, not persuaded, but just informed by actual professionals in the agricultural industry, perhaps by veterinarians as well, by experts. Yeah, so that's my main point. The other point, someone also said, ideally they wouldn't just see the slaughter process, they would also see every step of how animals are exploited. It goes far beyond the slaughterhouse. It's on the farms, it's in the hatcheries for chickens, it's in the pens where they are kept, they're enslaved, they're force-fed. Often they are kept under fluorescent lights so that they eat more, so that they gain more weight faster, which is more profitable. Plenty of ways that they are ruthlessly exploited outside of the slaughterhouse. So you got a point there. Absolutely. Ideally we would, but we're bringing this back to the realm of what's practical. If you had to choose one school trip for all the students to go on, which one would it be? Where would you take them? I would take them to the slaughterhouse, because that really, first of all, it's really going to ruffle some feathers. It's really going to grab their attention more so than a farm, because it's more immediate, you know, it's more visceral and it's extremely violent. It's undeniable. When you see an animal being massacred in front of you, it's undeniable. And also the slaughterhouse is where you really would have that percentage of students who would decide to go vegan on the spot. But also the slaughterhouse is a good one because at a slaughterhouse, you would see the so-called high welfare animals also getting killed. You start to realize that it doesn't matter how high welfare the cow is and the steak is, that cow is in the slaughterhouse queue, is on the kill floor with the rest of them, feeling terrified for their lives, terrified and in agony in their last moments. The same with high welfare pigs, high welfare chickens and whatnot. They all end up at the same place. They all end up in the same hellscape. Do you think there are slaughterhouses in heaven? No, it's much more characteristic of hell, a slaughterhouse. Cold, metallic, blood-soaked floors. But if I had to add one more school trip to the itinerary of an average student, I would choose a sanctuary. Sanctuaries, as you know, are vegan. Sanctuaries are safe havens for rescued farm animals. And it is at sanctuaries where people are able to see and experience a dignified life, a real dignified life of relative freedom and security for these farm animals. You're able to see them in a dignified state. So you get that contrast between the slaughterhouse, which is the status quo, and you get a vision paired with it of what life could be like for these gentle, sensitive creatures. And that contrast, I think that would be better than any speech I could make here. If you got to experience life on a sanctuary, they're using it as therapy now. Cow hugging is a form of therapy, animal therapy, where you simply spend time with a cow or with a sheep, a lamb, a goat, but often cows because they're big and mellow and they're just relaxed in these sanctuaries. And this cures people just by spending time with one of these farm animals that are typically seen as objects, objectified and enslaved, meat slaves, dairy slaves. And spending time with one of these gentle creatures in a dignified state is enough to cure people of anxiety and stress and a variety of mental ailments, you know? So maybe the order could be that the kids first go to a sanctuary and then they go to the slaughterhouse, right? And then you can see that contrast. You can start to bond with these gentle creatures. You can start to form connections with cows and sheep and pigs and chickens. Wonderful creatures. In the slaughterhouse, you can feel that all be taken away. You can feel what it's like for these animals, for their kin, to be massacred. And that's the appropriate journey that I would go on as a teacher. Not that they'll probably ever let me teach, I don't know. Not with the way I'm talking right now. And lastly, if you really lack faith in the human condition, you lack faith in the human population to act on the information of the animal holocaust, the real honest truth of the animal holocaust. If that's you, and you just have no faith in people, I propose that we find out. I propose that we find out the character of every single human here on this earth when given the truth about animals. Give everyone the information, no more hiding, no more fear of the truth, no more fear of desensitizing their little minds, no more patronizing. If they are consuming the products of animals, they have a right to know. They have a right to know how those animals were procured for them. If you fear them being turned into hardened animal abusers, guess what? They're already animal abusers. They're already abusing animals. It can't get any worse, right? They're abusing animals through ignorance. It can't get any worse for the animals. And if some of these school students turn out to be psychopaths, great. We've just revealed them. That's where you want psychopaths to be. You want ruthless, murderous psychos, animal abusing psychos to be out in the open where you can see them, where you can identify them. It's far safer that way. But also with that class going to that school trip, so maybe there are psychos in that class going to that school trip, but I'll tell you what, there will also be compassionate people. There will also be open-minded people who hold themselves morally accountable, who care about morals. Give those good, compassionate people a chance to be on the right side of history by providing them with real experience of the horrors they're paying for. I propose that we eradicate ignorance when it comes to animal enslavement and animal agriculture. It's about time that everyone was informed. And now that we have the internet, guess what I'm doing, guys? I'm using the internet because the internet is accessible by almost every country. There are a few countries out there that don't allow the internet, but almost every country. So this could be seen by a lot of different people, potentially. That is unprecedented in history. The time is now where we can eradicate ignorance about the animal agricultural industry. And from there, everyone will have a choice to either pick the loser side of the conservative oppressor who wants to remain an oppressor and will abuse their position of power that they were ordained with through birth, right? Or they can pick the growing side of the righteous, of the compassionate, conscious, caring vegans. So that's what I wanted to say in this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.